Bastrop, it's a typical small Texas town on the Colorado. It's a town that represents a wide swath of what Texas is all about. Certainly the churches, football on Friday nights.
All Bears, Bastrop led 76-9. That is not a typo, folks.
I grew up here. My dad grew up here. My grandparents grew up here. Louisiana has a town named after the same guy that's called Bastrop, but we say Bastrop.
I'm a fifth-generation Bastropian. Bastrop is known as the home of the Lost Pines.
It's an old town, and there's a lot of history. Bastrop was founded by immigrants from the southern United States. They brought enslaved African Americans with them.
In the days of segregation, we as African Americans provided jobs for one another. We had our own barbershops, restaurants. The class of 1970 was the first fully integrated class in Bastrop High School.
In the mid-90s, even at that period of time, the African Americans and the whites were, I think, separated in a lot of ways.
Interracial dating in Bastrop in the 90s existed, but it was something that was hidden and it was dangerous. We've come a long way in some instances, but yet and still, justice is slow in Bastrop County for African Americans.
This morning, 19-year-old Stacey Stites was reported missing.
Family members came from all corners of Texas to comfort Carol Stites. She lost her youngest, Stacey Lee.
She had her plans, and now somebody's taken that away. I think you just about got it. Where am I?
You're in the far end there.
Yes, yeah.
The gravity takes hold.
There you go. Yep. It's been 24 years since you lost your daughter, Stacey. Yep. Tell me a little bit about Stacey. Stacey was your youngest of 5.
I found out that I was pregnant with Stacey, and I had cancer at the same time. And so I put off any drugs or any chemicals to keep that child alive until I had her, because that soul was more precious to me than mine. From the time she was able to move, she was up and at 'em. She was like the white tornado. That's exactly what they called her when she was little. She was into everything and did everything and friends with everybody.
I was friends with Stacey in high school. We were involved in some church groups and sports together. She was just kind of like a sunflower, sunshine. She was funny. She was always cracking jokes. She didn't really take a lot of things seriously. She was always in the moment. She was looking for what everybody does, young love.
Go away.
Stacey lost her father as a child, and apparently it had quite an impact on her. According to friends and family, she seemed to lose her way for a while.
She ended up pregnant.
She was 15.
Mm-hmm. Yes, devastating. It took 2 of my daughters to get me in a room upstairs by myself to let me know what had gone on.
She did decide to give the baby up for adoption. Every year, Smithville has their jamboree. That's where Stacey met Jimmy Fennell.
He was on duty at the festival, you know, security. And they got to talking, and they talked, and they talked, and they talked. Pretty soon, he was hanging around the house, and they talked and talked. And then
what did you think of him?
I like Jimmy. He was raised in the church that I was raised in. He's had the same values that I was raised with. I thought he was heaven sent. This guy was here, and it was just about everything that I wanted in a son-in-law.
She was more outgoing, he was a little more conservative, but I thought he was good for her.
That's the picture of her and him. That was at his graduation when he became a policeman.
Jimmy began working for the Giddings Police Department.
Stacey was very excited about their relationship.
Stacey moved in with Jimmy in his apartment upstairs, and Carol lived in the same building downstairs, catty corner to Stacey and Jimmy's apartment.
They moved in together and they said, we're engaged, we're getting married. So that was just about, okay, at least you're getting married. You're not going to live in sin, as I would think of it.
It was going to be a big wedding. She was so excited. She had planned every detail.
Here's the thing for the Georgetown Church of Christ, the fees and the use of the church facilities.
Yeah. She was wanting to make more money for her wedding. She went into H-E-B's grocery company, and they gave her a job in the produce department. And so Stacey had to be at work early in the morning.
She was working hard. Every 2 weeks when she got paid, she was making a payment on the wedding dress.
There was excitement in the beginning, but I think as every day kind of ticked by, it was less and less. I know that it was definitely stressful for her just because she had to work and come home, and she was expected to do laundry, clean. For a 19-year-old, that's kind of a big transition.
Does she share any concerns?
She didn't share any concerns, that she was really excited about getting married. She really loved Jimmy.
You were a little concerned, you were a little emotional before the wedding.
Stress.
And that you cried a couple of times. You thought that Jimmy wasn't quite as...
I was the mother, and Stacey was my daughter, and I expected him to perform the way I wanted him to.
My name is Athena, and we were besties, high school. This is going back in time. Oh, wow. Stacey called me and told me that she's getting engaged and getting married. And Stacey never sounded like a giddy girl in love. She sounded giddy about her wedding and planning her wedding and making things for her wedding, but she never talked about Jimmy.
I think that she started seeing sides of Jimmy that he was very possessive, and it was kind of his way or no way. And I don't know that she was necessarily comfortable with that, so I think that they started butting heads.
Tell me, Carol, when you got the call.
H-E-B's called. It said that Stacey hadn't got to work.
That's the first inkling that something is wrong.
We didn't know what to do. We made flyers and started walking door to door, hoping that we could find her alive.
Tell me about that night before April 22nd. Do you remember that night?
It was normal, everyday evening stuff. This voice that I've heard all my year, and it makes me sound a little nuts, and I call it the Holy Spirit, all my life that I've had guide me. It said, you did a good job, and now your job is done. How do you tell your daughter that the thoughts in your mind was, if you die today, I can never be more proud of you? How do you tell that to someone?
We know that Jimmy Fennell was at Little League practice from around 5 in the evening on April 22nd, 1996. At around 8:00 p.m., Carol saw Jimmy come home from Little League practice.
Carol actually saw Jimmy and Stacey meet outside and have sort of an embrace outside her window. Of course, she lives downstairs. And she saw Stacey walking with Jimmy, laughing and joking as they went up the stairs to their apartment.
The last words out of her mouth was, Mom, I love you. And I said, I know you do.
The narrative that Jimmy provides is that the two of them are basically home for a good part of the evening, and they're sort of getting along great, and that then she goes to bed, he stays up and watches some TV.
We knew from Jimmy, her fiance, Stacey Stites left her home at approximately 3 a.m. like she always did, to go to a 3:30 a.m. shift at the HEB to work in produce. She drove Jimmy's truck, as she often did. Her normal route to work was on Highway 21 through Bastrop.
Andrew Cardenas is a co-worker of hers, and he's there in the parking lot waiting for Stacey to arrive. Stacey never does. And Stacey's not one to be late for work. And that's the first inkling that something is wrong.
They found a red truck in Bastrop by the high school. At about 5:23 that morning, a patrol officer had come across it. He didn't know that it had any relevance to anything. He called it into dispatch just because it was at the high school. It didn't register as stolen.
He was advised that the truck was owned by Fennell. He basically was able to look inside the truck. It was securely locked. The ignition was intact. There was nothing overtly wrong that he knew about, and so he just went on his way and continued his patrol.
Then as darkness shifts to daybreak, that innocent-looking truck becomes a little more suspicious.
Roughly an hour later, around about 6:45 in the morning, Carol Stites gets a phone call from the grocery store wondering where Stacey is. She hasn't shown up.
Stacey was always on time.
Did you suspect something was wrong immediately?
No, I thought maybe his truck broke down or something. I immediately turned around and called Jimmy. I said, Jimmy, Stacey didn't make it to HEB's. And he says, okay, I'll be down in just a minute.
He's getting dressed, he's tucking in his shirt. She notices that he looks like he's just woke up. She grabbed the key, she handed him to Jimmy so that he could go look for Stacey.
My name is David Board. I worked as a detective for the Bastrop Police Department at the time of Stacey Stites' disappearance. I received a call of a missing person. Stacey Stites had left Giddings, Texas, and was en route to work at HEB in Bastrop and never made it.
When the call comes in that Stacey's didn't make it to work, then dispatch and the patrol officer had sort of a uh-oh moment, and they went back.
Her pickup truck was at the Bastrop High School, so I responded there. I remember there was a belt. A part of a leather belt was located outside the truck.
Now we've got a missing person, and we've got the car that she was supposedly driving that morning. So we're gonna put these together. They impound the truck.
Once Jimmy Fennell, Stacey's fiancé, unlocks that truck for investigators, they ask him to take a look and point out anything that seems unusual.
Detective Ed Sommel of the Bastrop Police Department stated that Jimmy pointed out a piece of green-colored plastic. Jimmy stated that it was part of a glass that Stacey drank out of, and that it was not in the truck broken like that before. Jimmy then pointed out one of the tennis shoes that was lying on the passenger floorboard. Jimmy pointed out that one of Stacey's earrings was on the passenger side floorboard.
There were body fluids in the floorboard of that truck. Didn't really know exactly what it was or what caused it, but it was unusual. There was evidence of a struggle at the truck. We suspected foul play.
The police chief questions Jimmy and says that he's visibly shaken and very concerned, but not in a state of panic. Then Jimmy identifies that belt found outside the truck as Stacey's, and that's when he breaks down. Then he goes home to be with Stacey's mom, Carol, to wait.
Since her truck was found, she was nowhere around. The Texas Ranger, Rocky Wardlow, was contacted. We went up in the helicopter, searched all over Bastrop.
was going through your mind, Crystal, all day?
Hoping that we could find her alive, but still have dread.
Stacey's body isn't discovered until about 3:30 that afternoon, alongside of a dirt road, kind of out in the county. There was a fella who was out there for an appointment, and he had stopped to pick his wife wildflowers because it was the spring in Texas, and then he found her body.
It had to be devastating.
It was awful. It was awful.
And then, as unbelievable as it may sound in this small town, just 2 weeks after Stacey's body is discovered, a second young woman is found dead in the woods.
The citizens of Bastrop were believing they may have a serial killer on the loose.
They found Stacey on the side of a road and a bunch of wildflowers.
It had to be devastating.
It was.
It was awful. It was awful. My memory of that is my mom just sitting in her chair, just, my baby, my baby, my baby, my baby.
We had a bridal shower just a couple of days before she died. And all the bridal stuff was still sitting on my dining room table.
How did you even process that?
The pastor from the church is the one who told me, and my question to him was, how could God let this happen? Things happen. You know, this is the devil's world.
When the DPS crime lab arrives, this is an impressive vehicle that comes down this dirt road in the middle of a pine forest. Exiting were photographers, serologists, physical evidence collection people. This was quite a unique crew to show up in this little sleepy county of Bastrop.
Stacey's body is kind of almost 10 to 12 feet off of the road in the high grass. She's laying on her back, and in between her legs, there's her name tag for the AGB. And she is missing a shoe from the foot that we found the shoe in the truck. That seems to be the shoe that she's missing. The interesting thing about that is her sock that's revealed underneath is completely clean, so it doesn't look like Stacey walked to this location. It looks like she was carried to this location and placed, meaning dumping a body.
The way she was clothed, what she'd been doing, how her zipper was broken from being pulled apart, about all of the things that told us this was a classic rape case.
There was what appeared to be the mate of that black woven belt that was found in the high school parking lot, laying on the side of the road. So this scene is now tying to the high school parking lot.
It was a braided leather belt that had been busted. It would appear to me that it was leather, and that for it to break, it would have had to have a tremendous amount of force pulling on it. It was enough force on that belt around Stacey Stites' neck to kill her. Stacey Stites was strangled to death.
The only prints that they were able to lift from the inside of the truck that were readable prints were Stacey's and Jimmy's. And yet, since that was his truck, his fingerprint being in that truck is not evidence of him perpetrating the crime.
Jimmy Fennell was absolutely considered as a suspect. Anytime a woman is murdered, the significant other is and should be one of the prime suspects.
Around the time of Stacey's death, another woman by the name of Mary Ann Alt was also found dead. A man named David Lawhon had confessed to her killing, and there was some talk that he might have been responsible for Stacey's death.
We knew about that case, and I know that it was definitely a consideration that there might have been a serial murderer up there.
There are some similarities between the Stacey Stites case and the Mary Ann case. Mary Ann Alt is a little bit older than Stacey Stites, but in both a truck is used, and in both a body is dumped, and in both a earring is an important piece of evidence.
David Lawhon had bragged about killing Stacey. And so David Lawhon became a suspect in Stacey Stites' murder. However, David Lawhon was excluded pretty quickly because the DNA from Stacey's murder did not match.
David Lawhon is convicted of that second murder, but still no arrests in Stacey's case, and her devastated family is mourning her loss.
Stacey's funeral was there in Bastrop. It was standing room only.
The police set up a camera, a secret camera, to provide surveillance of the ceremony that's taking place. They're trying to surreptitiously capture people's emotions, people's reactions.
I remember walking around and thinking, did the person that killed Stacey, did they come to her funeral?
There are very few murders in Bastrop, a sleepy little southeast Texas town. And this one to be a young girl who went to high school, played sports, was active in her church. This would be the last person most people would believe would be involved in a crime.
There are 32 HEB employees from Austin helping out at this Bastrop store, a small favor they feel for fellow workers trying to cope with a traumatic experience.
Very sad for what happened.
Almost all of the more than 100 workers from this store are attending the memorial service for Stacey Stites.
At the church, at the funeral, the police placed 2 camcorders in strategic locations. The camcorder that is placed in a box with a hole cut in the box. It's placed like that so that you can't tell that it's a video recording device. 4 days after this crime, they don't have any direct leads on anybody. And so they're looking for anything that seems out of the ordinary, anything that looks like it might point to a suspect.
We were supposed to be getting together for a wedding in a few weeks. Instead of going to Stacey's wedding, now we're going to Stacey's memorial.
It was devastating to all of us, including Jimmy. He was definitely a man who had just lost his fiancée.
Jimmy went over to the coffin and he had the wedding ring in his hand and he put the wedding ring on her finger.
Told her goodbye.
Yeah, told her goodbye. It was devastating. And she's buried with that wedding ring. She's buried in her wedding dress. And she worked hard for that wedding dress, and we all decided that that's what she should be buried in.
There was a graveside service, and what seemed unusual to me at that service was just that Jimmy, her fiance, really didn't show a lot of emotion at all.
Of course, everybody grieves in their own way. Now today, Stacey's mother and sisters say they have always believed that Jimmy was innocent. But at the time, Stacey's sister Crystal was so concerned about Jimmy's behavior that she hired a private investigator and even made a list of his questionable behavior.
You kind of want to suspect the people nearest to her, and then you try to figure it out in your head of what happened and how did it happen. But once we knew that she had been raped, our emotions were like, it had to be somebody else.
We did not believe that Jimmy had hurt Stacey at all.
In fact, Jimmy himself even later talked about the pain he was feeling over Stacey's death.
It's going to be with me forever. I'll think about it, it'll be there. There's no way it's going to go away.
So Karen Blakely was the lead DNA analyst who processed the crime scene. She makes a telephone call to Rocky Wardlow, the lead investigator on the case. Karen Blakely told him the semen was deposited at the same time as the death. Essentially, she told him the rape happened at the same time Stacey died. It meant that Rocky Wardlow had the smoking gun. It meant that all he needed to do was to find the depositor of the semen. He is simply looking for a DNA match.
Investigators obtained reference samples from 28 men who had some part in Stacey Stites' life. Acquaintances, friends, co-workers.
Not one of them is a match, not even her fiancé, Jimmy Fennell. So the police are wondering, is there some other explanation? What if Stacey had been cheating? Could that be a motive for Jimmy Fennell to kill her?
It was hard having the finger pointed at you. It was hard for them saying that, yeah, you killed Stacey, your fiance, that you did it because of these reasons, you know. But, you know, I kept in my mind that I didn't do it.
Bastrop County Sheriff's Office. There's a recorded phone conversation in which a woman calls in anonymously and claims her son was having an affair with Stacey.
I think Stacey was having a liaison, okay? I'm almost positive of it.
I mean, we've all kind of assumed that.
Who has a motive for this?
Well, at this point, the boyfriend does.
That's right.
That's the prime suspect. The person that we're trying to find is a liaison. For the longest time, we've had our suspicions, okay?
The woman refuses to provide her son's name, although subsequently he was identified and he was ruled out.
And as the call continues, you can hear the investigators' frustration. It's been 4 months, and this investigation is going nowhere.
See, at this point, we're stymied. We've hit a brick wall. I have to look at Stacey Stites' mom at least once a week, every day, in the face. And it makes me not want to answer the phone because I know it's her, and I know she wants me to tell her something, and I have nothing to tell her.
We can see that Rocky Wardlow continues to look at Jimmy Fennell through 1996 as his investigation continues to go on. We can see that because he gives him a polygraph test.
One of the questions asked Jimmy was, did you strangle Stacey? Jimmy answered he did not. Another question asked Jimmy was, were you involved in the death of Stacey Stites? Jimmy Fennell stated again he was not. The examiner determined that Jimmy was deceptive in these two answers. Jimmy, in defense of himself, said that he was emotional, that all he could visualize in his mind was her lying deceased in the casket.
So it didn't concern you at all that he seemed to be deceptive on the polygraph test?
No. Nah, I think we would talk about it and think that he was just upset.
I think he felt bad that he didn't get up and take her to work that day. And,
So-
then you feel like if I had been there, this wouldn't have happened.
Right.
What was it that led them to eliminate Jimmy Fennell?
Because of the logistic problems. Jimmy's truck was found in Bastrop, and he was home in Giddings, which is some 30 miles away. And so that was the problem, is that law enforcement could never make it make any sense that Jimmy had any involvement in this because they couldn't figure out how he ever could have gotten back home.
Unless he had a friend who might have given him a ride.
The investigators, the Texas Rangers, explored the possibility that somehow maybe someone had helped him and they could never find anything or anybody that credibly could have helped him. They looked at the mileage on the different patrol vehicles there at Giddings PD where he worked to see if there was any of those that were off, and there weren't. They looked at whether there were bus fares for people that night, and there weren't any. They looked at cab fares to see if there was some way he could have taken a cab.
Jimmy Fennell himself has always insisted that he is innocent.
They thoroughly vetted all the evidence they had, and they cleared him.
It was only after they matched the DNA to somebody that they dropped Jimmy as a suspect.
Another woman is violently attacked, and this woman lives. And her case is about to change everything.
I'm one of the investigators on the Stacey Stites murder. Do you even know who she is?
Stacey's murder goes unsolved for nearly a year. The cops are ostensibly looking at Jimmy and maybe in a couple other directions, but nothing's really happening.
1996 was an election year. Richard Hernandez won the position of the Bastrop County Sheriff. Hernandez announced that he would solve the murder of Stacey Stites within 6 months of taking office.
Richard Hernandez seizes on the Stites case, and this investigation begins to speed up. Wardlow is looking for a DNA match. That's the smoking gun.
Linda Schluter was another woman who was about 19 who had been abducted and beaten.
Linda Schluter was at this payphone in Bastrop, and there's a man who's kind of bothering her.
And he picked up the payphone next to the payphone I was on. He proceeded to ask me if he could get a ride. And he said, "I'm gonna freeze to death." I felt bad, so I said, "Fine, I'll give you a ride." Once we took a ride on Main Street, he started to get out, and he got back in really quick, and he said, "Don't I get a hug?" And the next thing I know, he grabs me by the back of my hair with his left hand and proceeds to slam my face into my steering wheel.
There's an incredible fight happening in the car. She basically gets away, and this guy takes her car and drives and then sort of crash abandons it somewhere down the road.
Deputies arrived, took her into Bastrop. They photographed her injuries. They took a statement.
I described the man that I gave a ride to. The police automatically knew who he was. They presented 6 African Americans on a piece of paper. This is the one who attacked me. The police told me that his name was Rodney Reed.
Mr. Reed was arrested, and later he was released without posting a bond. He was just released.
The way in which Linda Schluter was attacked really lent itself to the police narrative of how Stacey Stites was attacked.
Rodney Reed surfaced as a suspect wholly and exclusively because he tried to abduct Linda 6 months after Stacey's murder, and a detective told the ranger about the case, and the ranger said, "Oh my God, that sounds like the Stites case."
Rocky Wardlow, the lead investigator from the Texas Rangers, he's wondering, do we have Rodney Reed's DNA on file? And it turns out they did have a sample of Rodney Reed's DNA in the system.
Because he had been involved with a woman in 1995 in some sort of a relationship.
And she alleged that Rodney Reed had sexually assaulted her in her apartment. I responded and conducted a crime scene investigation.
She ultimately declines to pursue charges against Reed, and that case is kind of dropped, but the police retain this biological evidence.
Texas Ranger Rocky Wardlow, he requested that the serologist take the DNA off a washcloth and various other items collected in October 1995 and compare it to the DNA collected off Stacey Stites' body.
It was a match. They found that Rodney Reed's DNA is identical to the DNA evidence recovered from Stacey's body.
My name is Sandra Reed, and I am Rodney Reed's mother. Richard Hernandez, the sheriff, and the city police came to the house, and I knew Richard before he even became sheriff. And they were looking for Rodney. Rodney was not there. So I said, Richard, what is this for? Well, I'm thinking it's drugs. Well, look, Richard. I said, now, people know Rodney don't sell drugs. He's not a drug dealer. He said, I know, Sandra. He said, but that's what they got. So, sure enough, Rodney came home. And I said, well, buddy, and get you some warm clothes, because I'm taking you to jail.
So they basically get Rodney into the police station, on a drug-related charge. But it all seems pretty much kind of a ruse in order to ask him about Stacey.
I don't sell no drugs. So what are we talking about?
Well, let me read you your rights and stuff first, Rodney, and then we'll get off into that.
Oh, so what we're talking about is different than with...
Yeah, that drug case, I just want to kind of push it off to the sides. Of course, you know that I'm one of the investigators on the Stacey Stites murder. You're one of the many, many people that we have talked to regarding this case. Talking with you was really nothing unusual. What I want to know from you is if you know this girl, and if you do, when did you meet her? Have you ever met her? Or do you even know who she is?
No, I do not. I don't know what Stacey Stites. I've seen that stuff on the news and stuff like that, but I don't know that person.
Never dated her?
No, I haven't.
What I would like to get from you, if you don't mind, is a written statement stating that I don't know the Stacey Stites. Do you have a problem with that?
No, I don't.
And along with the statement, what I'd like to do is, if it's okay with you, is to get a sample of your blood, get some saliva samples and some hair samples, so that we can compare that with some of the stuff that we already have.
I don't mind doing anything, but I'd like to have a lawyer, an attorney, you know, to back me up on what I'm doing, you know.
Well, I understand. That's perfectly all right.
Okay. No, David.
Yeah.
All this here, this stuff here, am I being charged with something?
We'll visit with you later about that. By the time the questioning is over, Rodney is charged with the murder of Stacey Stites.
He stated that he was afraid. He was aware that Stacey was dead, and he was a black male having sex with a white girl in Bastrop.
Stacey Stites was white. Rodney Reed was black. Rodney lived in Texas long enough to know what that meant.
This case is about to draw big attention to the small town of Bastrop.
He has some high-profile names coming to his defense now.
And spark what many believe will be a long road to justice.